We shall fight in the field.
Mit der Akzeptanz der
C'est pas parce que les
vier
Britanniques
Grundfreiheiten und dazu gehört
ont
auch
décidé
die
de sortir qu'ils ne doivent pas
Freizügigkeit
être
der
associés à ce
Personen.
processus.
Brexit means Brexit.
Hello and welcome to another Brexitometer brought to you by the Martin Center. Winter is coming, as you can see around me. Probably first time since the summer where I feel really cold doing this. There's not a lot of things to report on Brexit this time around, actually, apart from the fact that things are not doing all that badly, apparently. There have been noises that all that triggering Article 16 and suspending the Irish Protocol talk has been slightly been put on the back burner for a while as the two sides negotiate. There is hope that the whole situation might be resolved before the end of the year. In Westminster, most people really talk about various corruption scandals that engulf the current government of Boris Johnson. We will go and see a lot of other issues that the government currently has to deal with. There's also questions about the Queen's health. She's probably right behind me, as you can see here. There's some talk that maybe we will never see her again in public, and that of course has its own political implications moving forward. So let's just take some stock about where we are currently in the state of British politics and how those things may impact Brexit moving forward. So let's start with COP26, the big climate summit in Glasgow, which wrapped up some days ago. And as you may remember, we mentioned in the last episode, that was something that the Conservative government had invested a lot of effort in, a lot of political capital in. It was supposed to be a showcase of global Britain, the UK taking leadership on issues of global importance outside of the EU. Now, you may have read the news by now. The results were slightly underwhelming, although not completely catastrophic, as it appeared sometime during the negotiations. It's not fair to say that things went as well as the government hoped. It wasn't a triumph that the Boris Johnson government was hoping to draw political capital from. You could call it a draw, more or less. This is what I'm saying. What is interesting, during the negotiations, there were some briefings in the British press by the government that presented the EU as being the big absent leader in the negotiations. So clearly the Brexit mindset is never absent from how this government thinks, even about global issues where theoretically everyone should be on the same page, like climate change. In the end, COP has passed by. Many people say that it was a bit like the big G20 summit earlier in the year, where also Boris Johnson tried to present himself as a big leader on a global stage, but things were a bit underwhelming. Global Britain marches on. It's not the triumph that everyone thought it was, or hoped in the government that it was going to be, but it clearly shows you how Britain is trying to be a player to be reckoned with in the international stage. And that is always something that the EU always has to take into account. Britain will be a partner that will have to be engaged as we move on with various issues of global importance. Now, you may remember some months ago, was it a couple of years ago, and a pandemic ago for sure, it was before the pandemic, we had recorded in front of Euston Station, the train station here in London, and the idea was that back then a big part of the agenda of the Boris Johnson government that had just come to power was the so-called agenda of levelling up, meaning bringing closer the economic level of London, where a lot of the economic activity takes place, and the north of England, particularly areas that had voted heavily for Brexit, and then eventually moved from the Labour Party to the Conservative Party in the December 2019 elections. And the reason we recorded from a train station was because a big part of this agenda of levelling up was also creating high-speed rail networks and high-speed rail connections between London and the north, as well as different parts of the north. Well, this week the unfortunate news came that a big part of the project of some rail construction and rail investment in the north of England would be scrapped. And the reason is the pandemic. The reason is that a lot of money has been spent on a lot of other things to mitigate the negative economic effect of the pandemic. The government tries to put a brave face on it. They say that a lot of other investments will be heading to the north. But to political observers here in Westminster, and this is quite important for Brexit as well, this is a sign that perhaps the first major pledge, the first major promise made to voters in the north of England by the Conservative Party has been broken. And why this matters for Brexit is that this government really has two things to offer to working class voters in the north of England who for the first time in their lives voted for the Conservatives and they delivered the majority to Boris Johnson. One is economic investment, such as the train that apparently is not going to happen now, and the other one is really hard, tough negotiating stance in relations with Europe on questions of immigration and all of those things. Which means that if now this thing has been taken away from the north in terms of investment, maybe the government will try to overcompensate by adopting a much more and even more hard line on questions of Brexit. We will see. Those things are never always, one thing leads to another. Various other factors come into play. But it's worth keeping an eye on the fractured relations of the Conservative government and its new electorate on working class people in the north of England. So that was another Brexitometer, a bit of an express Brexitometer. Not a lot of stuff to report today, although not a lot of Brexit-related stuff to report today. The big news are ahead of us. We will have to see whether the negotiations before the end of the year will result in an agreement. As I said, the noises currently are much more positive than before. Another thing to keep in mind is the pandemic. When you watch this, probably the pandemic and lockdowns will be back in the news in Europe. Things are quite calm on this front for now in the UK, but we will have to wait and see. As we do know, the virus really does its rounds around everyone in the end. Nobody is spared. And I think Boris Johnson a few days ago said that when it comes to the pandemic, we will have to see the clouds gathering in Europe. So as you see, there's always an opportunity with this government to frame everything in terms of a menace coming from Europe. We will be with you again at least once before the end of the year to report on what has been going on in the negotiations between David Frost and Maros Sefcovic over Ireland. So until next time, as always, follow us on social media using the hashtag Brexitometer and take care.
We shall fight in the field.
Mit der Akzeptanz
Mais
der
ce
n'est pas parce que les
4
Britanniques
Grundfreiheiten und dazu gehört
ont
auch
décidé
die
de sortir qu'ils ne doivent pas
Freizügigkeit
être
der
associés à ce
Personen.
processus.
Brexit means Brexit.